Welcome back to Brain Trash, a psychiatrist tell-all where we dig through the messy, misunderstood, and mind-blowing parts of mental health no one talks about enough. And today we're talking about dyspraxia, also known as developmental coordination disorder, but honestly, that name really doesn't even begin to cover what it actually feels like to live with it. So we're not just talking about being clumsy, we're talking about brains that struggle to actually translate the intention into an action. So whether it's tying your shoes, copying a diagram, figuring out how to pack a bag without your brain short-circuiting, dyspraxia can be a silent obstacle course. And here's the kicker. It's often missed in adults, especially if you're also dealing with any type of neurodivergence. So ADHD, autism, or just labeled as not trying hard enough growing up. If this sounds familiar, stick around because today we are breaking it down. What dyspraxia is, how it shows up in real life, what the brain is doing or not doing, and what treatments, if any, can help. So let's trash the myths and talk about the science.
So I'm excited to talk about this because I have dyspraxia, and kind of better understanding this and seeing it, I'm like, oh, I wasn't broken. And I feel like so many people and so many practitioners could benefit from understanding this from so many perspectives. And parents, as a mom of an autistic kid, kids, plural, important. So what is dyspraxia? Let's start with praxia. So praxia is the brain's ability to plan and execute coordinated movements, right? And it's not about moving your muscles. It's about all of it, sequencing it in your brain. What steps do I do this in? What are the actual movements I'm making? Where am I in space? Am I going to bump into anything when I'm doing this? How small do I make the movement? How big do I move it? And then what does it feel like? So there are so many different components of the brain that are implicated in moving that you don't even realize, right? Because there's a sensory component, which we know in neurodivergence is already compromised or different. And then we have the actual motor areas, and we have the kind of planning of it, right? So dyspraxia is when we have a developmental issue with that. And then there's something called apraxia, which Tabitha, you have a lot of experience in the neuro ICU with. That's an acquired later in life. There's been some sort of a damage to the brain, and now we have an impairment in coordination and planning of movements. So when we're thinking about how does one plan a movement? I'm moving my arms here. I'm not doing much thinking, but let's think about routine tasks, right? There are so many different things that kind of run into this, and there's so many different types of dyspraxia. But let's start with apraxia first of all. So we were talking a little bit about verbal apraxia, which is something that is also really common in neurodivergent folks, also common in people who've had strokes. So tell me a little bit about kind of what you've seen in the neuro ICU with apraxia and what that is and what it looks like.
Well, yeah, when we look at any type of neurological deficit, post-stroke, we're looking at what area of the brain did this take place in? Was it a thrombus, right? What caused it? How much of the oxygenation to that area was cut off and for how long? What type of interventions were taken within what time frame? These all help to save brain tissue, essentially. The more damage we have, obviously, in each area is going to affect a person. But there's a pretty exact science, right? We look at the specific part of the brain, and that will determine what functions are affected as well. It's pretty cool when you go in and you see angiogram, somebody's brain, lighting up the vasculature and seeing exactly where that spot is. And I mean, brilliant neurointerventionalists being able to say well, this is what's going to happen from that. And so that was always something that I loved to just be a fly on the wall for and listen to them talk about, because I'd be oh my gosh, this is amazing. I think probably the biggest example of how fascinating this can be, and not necessarily fascinating in a positive way, but just really giving a good objective of what that looks like in practice is there will be people who have complete non-fluent aphasia where they just can't talk. And you could tell they want to talk, but they can't make the words happen. And that can be forever. It can be something that gets a little bit better with speech therapy over time. It really depends on the level of damage. But a lot of times too, in people who have this aphasia, they also can sing. So you'll have family members sitting at the bedside, just so emotional over the fact that they can still sing the happy birthday song, even though we can't get them to say words, even with heavy prompting or with other types of interventions, but put on a familiar song and they can sing because it comes from a completely different spot in the brain, right? The speech comes from Broca's area. There's a lot of different mechanisms that impact speech, but then when we look at songs, it's more so connected to that emotional side in a different location in the brain. And so keeping that intact, we still are able to get them to verbalize, which is like gives a really good illustration of how the spot that it happens in our brain affects what the outcomes will be.
Dude, like the areas in the brain that can be implicated in strokes, we can pinpoint those, right? And that's kind of where it gets weird for neurodivergence is there's been a lot of studies that have looked at certain symptoms that people have in neurodivergence, like clumsiness or like an inability to copy a facial expression, an inability to say words that you have in your brain, but you can't sequence how to say it and it just comes out wrong. And then you end up kind of with this embarrassment component or like kind of freezing. So there are similar areas that are implicated in the brain. So some of them, cerebellum, this is where we see like balance happen. This is where we see like rhythm happen. We see like some of the motor planning happening here. We know that this is not as active in neurodivergent people who have dyspraxia. Basal ganglia, this is a part of the brain that does like automatic movements and kind of that like muscle memory component. That, again, not as strong. The parietal lobes, so this is something that's like heavily involved in dyspraxia, is sensory integration with motor planning. So like, where am I in space? How do things feel? How am I moving my body, right? All of that. And that can be really strong for people who have strong sensory issues. And then as they're overstimulated, those areas of the brain cannot then function to do basic motor tasks or basic planning. Premotor cortex and like prefrontal cortex, all of those areas being able to sequence out like what movements am I making or what steps do I take. Things like when I'm taking a shower, I need to take my clothes off and then I need to step into the shower. I need to make sure my glasses are off, my earrings are out. I need to wash my hair. I need to wet my hair. Like the amount of steps that go into such simple tasks that neurotypical people take for granted, that's massive. Even like as NPs, we're constantly trying to get people to take their medication or do their ADLs, right? Their activities of daily living. But I think a lot of us overestimate how hard this can be for people. So what are you seeing as far as like things some of your autistic or neurodivergent patients, especially adults, like young adults, are struggling with for like ADLs?
One of the biggest things is taking medications, right? Just remembering to take them, making a system that works, stuff like that. I will always tell people like, do not make a new system. It's not going to work. Like, we're just not going to do that, right? So like, what does your day look like? What are you doing on a consistent basis, right? Most people are plugging in and unplugging their phone when they go to bed and when they wake up in the morning. So those are like two really consistent timing pieces that we can utilize to add something into a routine so that it's not as hard to create a new one. So like literally if I plug my phone in at night, putting my pill bottle on top of my phone, I'm not allowed to unplug my phone until I've taken it. But we also then have to make sure there's water next to it, right? So there are things that are still hard about that. But if we utilize a routine that already exists to put a self-care thing into it, like it can make it easier or at least make the timing of it easier so that it's not a whole new, really overwhelming thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that I think things become very overwhelming very fast. Like the process of even taking medication. Like when we're looking at dyspraxia, one of the components of that is storing things and organizing things. So if I have a medication bottle and I'm like looking at my kitchen and I have some chaos piles here and there of just a bunch of shit that I put in a drawer and I know what's in there. I know it's my junk drawer and I know all the sorts of things that are in there all the time, unless someone moves it. And then I have like all these other drawers, like where do I put my medication, right? And if I try to make a medication section and organize everything in this very specific way, sometimes like that dyspraxia, one, makes it hard to figure out the organization process behind that. Two, like where do I put the medication? What do I do with it? And then three, if it's not in front of my face, am I even going to find it again, right? Because like memory also becomes a component that's impacted with dyspraxia. So not only are you having trouble with like sequencing out where things are, putting things away, moving things around, and then completing those tasks every day, but if you're not seeing it, that's even more of an issue. And then like when we have parents who have autistic kids, and this is, or ADHD kids, something in child psych that I've heard forever. Like, what are your biggest complaints about like what parents are coming in with their kids, their teenagers?
I mean, they just won't do A, B, or C. It seems like they don't care. Why are they being lazy? That kind of stuff.
Okay, so like that's the biggest thing. Why won't they brush their teeth? Why won't they take a shower? Why won't they take their medication? Why don't they do their homework? Why don't they go to bed? Why don't they clean their room? The room thing is something that I've heard like they get so angry that like their Adderall is not making them clean the room. And I'm like, bro, it's just not. Like And like a lot of that comes from the dyspraxia of people can't sequence how to do those things. When I say go clean your room, that to somebody like a parent would mean like, okay, you need to like take everything off of your shelves, you need to reorganize it, you need to dust everything, you need to wipe those shelves clean, you need to like put your pillows, make your bed. By making your bed, you have to take the blankets off, you change the sheets, right? Like change the pillowcases. There are so many different components to cleaning your room that to somebody who can't even like put steps together that are very simple to, you know, kick a soccer ball or brush your teeth, then that's like beyond overwhelming, right? Handwriting, that's another thing. Like your handwriting is very messy. People with dyspraxia cannot make those fine motor movements to make nice handwriting. It just doesn't exist. We don't know how to grasp the pencil correctly. We can't even like if we're watching someone else do it, we can't copy that because there's mirror neuron issues. We can't learn that way. So it doesn't matter like if their intention is to clean the room or their intention is to write neatly, they just can't do it. So it creates this kind of like hostile environment where parents just don't understand where kids are, and they think that they're being defiant or avoidant when it's really like they're feeling like they will fail if they try this task.
It reminds me of like back in the day, like, I don't know if you had these, but like we had like the spiral shoelaces or those little pencil holder things where like it would make your hand go right up, right? Like I had all of these things and I can't decide, was that my parents trying to help me or my parents being like, I'm so fucking frustrated with trying to continue to teach you how to do this that I'm just going to say, I fucking give up. Here's this device to help you or something, you know?
It's interesting. Yeah, I have a little pen holder thing for Mayumi, but like she can do it when it's on, but when I take it off, she can't replicate it, which is again, it's a part of the dyspraxia of like she can't figure out where to put it and like she just can't learn it, right? Like it's so hard. So it's interesting, like lefts and rights can be hard, reading maps can be difficult. As far as like types of apraxia, the shoelaces thing, like people will often tie their shoes like way later, potty train way later if they have dyspraxia. So ideomotor dyspraxia, so this is like single step motor tasks, so like waving. So if you're trying to teach a nonverbal autistic kid and said like, okay, wave now, sometimes when you're telling them that, they verbally can't like put the task together to like put hand up, wave. That's hard. Ideational dyspraxia, so multi-step action. So I need to make I need to make an IKEA furniture thing. You open the book. Personally, no matter how many times I've made it, I make it backwards or like upside down or like going the wrong way. I don't even know because I'm like so proud of myself, and then it like gets to the end and I'm like, why is it wrong?
Drawer like won't go all the way in or something.
Go in, or like I literally use the wrong screws. Like everything is just always wrong, and I just don't understand it. Like I built a chair for our patio. Janelle's like, how could you even fuck this up? I'm like, now I can tell him it's like it's the autism, bro. Sorry. One of the most interesting ones I found is constructional dyspraxia, which is like building things, parallel parking. So parking, you might often hit curbs or have trouble getting into a spot because of that spatial awareness component. Tripping over your feet, clumsiness. If you go to like organize a shelf, you knock things over, you're breaking things in a store. Like you go to grab something, you've knocked 10 things over. You go to drink water, it spills down your face because you can't get the tip right or your mouth isn't opening at the correct time. You're going to eat and like you don't remember to chew first, so you're just like kind of like rushing or swallowing it. Scissors, like typing. There's just like so many like weird motor things that we take for granted that happen in life, and like I think autistic people just kind of end up looking like uncoordinated and clumsy when it's, you know, much more than that.
Okay, but like you're listing all these things off and I'm thinking like, isn't it like, doesn't everybody have some of these?
I mean, yes, but then it's like, how severe are they, right? Like, by a certain age, a kid should be able to ride a scooter, right? But like, when you're watching a kid ride a scooter, a lot of kids will just get on it and they'll just learn to ride it. That's what my neighbor told me. She said, your kid's just going to get on it and learn to ride it. And like, I don't know how many times I kept telling her, like, this is how you pedal your bike, or this is how you like put your foot. And she couldn't get it, dude. Like, and there's kids who are younger than her, who are like 1, and they're getting it. And she just couldn't figure it out.
Well, we still can't do the pedal bike because the problem is when you pedal backwards, it breaks. And so pushing forward is the hard part for us to learn over here. So every time I try to get him to like pedal, it just stops the bike because he goes backwards. He can't figure out how to go forwards.
And then we get like mass amounts of failure that ends up in frustration and outbursts. And I just don't want to do it. Don't touch me. Forget it. I don't want to do it. Right.
And then I'm carrying a bike for a mile. Yeah.
That sounds familiar. Mm-hmm. Yep. And just abandoning ship. Yep. Any step that my daughter tries to take, I swear to God, it's like avoidance, because she knows that like she's not going to be able to do it, or she like can't, so she just won't. Sometimes like utensils, you miss your mouth so often, you just end up using your hands. So you'll see kids who just like won't try. But
That was a rule at my house growing up, is that I was allowed to eat with my hands at home, but at restaurants I had to actually use silverware because it looked weird for me to not in public. So
like
it's fine.
how
Everything's
old are
normal
you?
here.
Is this like 17 you had this rule put in, or is this
Oh
like
yeah, no, I was like 15 still when I was doing it. But no, it started when I was like a little kid.
I mean, to be fair, I most often get so annoyed with having to like be bothered by silverware that sometimes I just eat with my hands and I just don't give a fuck.
Yeah. I mean, other cultures do it all the time. Fucking love eating Egyptian food. You just like rip off the fucking bread and pick it up.
And take it. Oh my
So
God.
much easier.
That's what I tell myself with even like the Filipino culture. I'm like, we're just eating like, you know, Filipinos and doing the whole meal thing. And like, Judel's like, no, we use spoons in the Philippines.
Okay, so the level of involvement that it has in like causing distress in different areas of your life and functioning and all of that, but like, how do we differentiate the motor skills issues or verbal stuff that come as part of the diagnosis of autism or the inattention of ADHD or that kind of stuff versus these separate things that are apraxia and dyspraxia?
That's interesting, because like with ADHD, sometimes like it'll exacerbate it. So you can't even really pull it apart until you've gone ahead and like medicated it. So with ADHD, if you are so inattentive, already making careless mistakes, already kind of clumsy, and then you have this on top of it, right? It kind of just like the inattention of like, well, now I can't focus on the few steps that I could sequence, and now I'm like really lost and erratic. Sometimes that'll come across more so as like hyperactivity and a lot more avoidance because of that. Um, and like the driving, even like people who have dyspraxia will struggle with turns, but it's not because they're looking at their phone. They're looking at the car, or they're looking at their limbs as they're driving at the wheel, or like looking at something specific. And that's kind of part of it too, is like, where are you looking? Do you have control of your limbs? Are you being kind of like careless, like you were paying attention to like the bird that's flying over there and then you like missed something? Or are you like actually focusing on your leg and still missing the ball when the ball is coming to you, right? Are you like dropping something because you're watching your hand and somehow like everything still falls and you're like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Or are you dropping something because somebody said something and you're like, what? And then all of a sudden, you know, the whole shelf falls on you. That would be like my differentiating factor there. But dyspraxia would be kind of like the reason that we see like toe walking, like balance issues, like a lot of the gait issues that happen with autistic folks.
So how much would you say it's like this is comorbid with any type of actual like neurodivergent diagnosis versus seeing them not be comorbid?
I want to say it's like close to 80% of people who are autistic also have a form of dyspraxia. And there's like several different forms, whether it's like planning your verbal output, whether it's like building things, whether it's like math type things, drawing pictures, all sorts of things like that. ADHD, I think the number was lower. I think it was closer to 50% of people with ADHD will have some form of dyspraxia, which is still fairly common, right? But not as common. Dyspraxia is something that's developmental, so it's seen in from like birth up, not necessarily from like an acquired thing. That would be apraxia, like you were talking about, somebody had a stroke or there was brain damage of some sort.
What do you think too, like when I hear you talking about these things, it's like there's a lot of times that I will hear parents putting in a lot of effort to correct these things, reverse these things, right? Like we're talking about with the pencil thing, right? Or, hey, I don't know how to clean up my room, so I'm just going to like tell you to keep doing it. And, you know, in the best way, they're trying to help their child, but maybe this is not addressing the need of like, hey, I need to break this down into smaller steps and that kind of stuff. How much of this do you think like lends itself to late diagnosis of things because there's that masking component that comes when we're like being corrected all the time?
That's interesting. I think that a lot of the problem though with the correction is that even when it's corrected, it cannot be fixed. So it becomes the cycle of just hating yourself and depression more so than anything else, because you can't even mask it at that point. Like people who have dyspraxia, the parent will say, you've loaded the dishwasher wrong, do it again. You've loaded the dishwasher wrong. Why would you load it like this? You've set the table wrong. You've put the things in the wrong place again. Like, why? We do this every fucking day. Like, how are you still getting it wrong? And no matter how many times it's corrected, it will not fix. So it's not necessarily that it can even be a mask. It will just continue to be pervasive enough to hate yourself and feel like there's something wrong with you. That's actually kind of comes into place. And then you just avoid these tasks later on and you're like, man, I don't even load the dishwasher. I'm going to have my partner do that. Or like, I don't want to do this because I'm not going to ride a bike because I know I'm going to fall because I don't know how to coordinate myself with like the pedals and the handles well enough, right? Or like I don't fit through spaces when I'm riding in the road and I fall over and crash into the bushes. I'm not saying that's me, but you know, I can't teach my kid how to ride a bike because I'm a danger.
So then what's the solution? Is it to, I guess in terms of like non-pharmacological intervention, like is it to not correct it, give them an opportunity to do the thing, and then like if it needs to be changed, however it was done, the dishwasher, I guess you just go in behind them and do it differently? Or like what's the
So that's a great question. And I think it's kind of like something that's important for like teachers to look at in schools and also for like parents to look at and just for like adults. So like sometimes as adults, if we're late diagnosed, we just need to accept that like we suck at loading the dishwasher and do it and do your best and like it'll get clean, right? It'll be fine or it won't. And then you'll have to redo it. If you are like a parent and that's happening, so there's a lot of different ways that we have to just step back and reteach things and they have to be taught differently. So we can't put the pressure on of like, you didn't do this right. You have to do it again. Pressure doesn't help people who have this learn. So people who have dyspraxia do not learn by observation. They cannot watch you load the dishwasher once and say, okay, here's how the plates go. Here's how the bowls go. They don't have that ability. Verbal directions do not work. You can tell them like, as they're doing it, do this, do that, do this, do that. It will not work and it will not stick. They will not remember it. What are things that we can do? So backwards, that's like the first thing is have them take everything out backwards. Or like they can unload it after it's been corrected. So then they know as they're taking it out, like, oh, that came from here, that came from there. And it's a forum to start retaining it. And like doing things step by step with them, not for them, because again, you don't want them to watch it, but like it takes a lot of repetition for them to build muscle memory. And that's what it's going to come to is like muscle memory. And even then they might question it. They might have like brushed their teeth correctly 100 times and then 101 times they're going to forget the steps and they might forget the toothpaste. And that's not because they're being defiant. It's because they literally don't have the ability to sequence it at that moment. Maybe they're overwhelmed or tired. The brain lost the ability. So repetition in a low pressure setting. One, errorless learning, like just do it. And like, you know, if you make an error, that's fine. And just kind of like move with it and then try again the next time. Visual schedules. So like actually like a picture of the dishwasher and how it should look, a picture of how whatever it's supposed to be. What's in this cabinet? Let me take a picture of it, how it should look. I'm going to put it right here. And then they can look at that picture and they can like match it. It can't be a cartoon. Even if you're doing like a potty training, you have to take a picture of them doing every step. So like, here's me pulling my pants down. Here's me pulling my diaper down. Here's me sitting on the potty. Here's me peeing. Here's me wiping. Here's me like wiping which direction too. They need to show that because that could get confusing as directions. Here's me getting off. Here's me pulling my diaper up. Here's me pulling my pants up. Here's me washing my hands. By that, we have to turn the sink on. We have the water on our hands. Then we get the soap and then we do this and then we wash and then we turn it off, right? Like that's so many fucking steps. And you have to have like a visual chart of all of those things. Brushing the teeth, same thing, like toothpaste on. What's the next step? And just take pictures and print it all out. That's huge. And it can help them to like rehearse, even if you write it down too, if they can read, then having them like read and rehearse those steps in their head before they do it. Autistic people often will rehearse motor things before they do them. So they'll say like, okay, when I have to do this, I have to do A, B, C, D. And they'll do it over and over in their head so they don't fuck up. Because usually they're so anxious about fucking up because it's happened so often. But those are like the evidence-based ways to learn if you have dyspraxia or to like teach somebody.
So like for kids, obviously their parents are helping them maybe hopefully with some of these things. If for like late diagnosed adults, right? Identifying the thing that needs to be laid out better can be really hard. I think that this is also a good example, again, that we've talked about before, where like something like occupational therapy can be so helpful because otherwise we're like shame spiraling in a therapist office, but there's no solution. Nobody's sitting there telling you this is how to do this thing. This is how to get yourself over that hill, right? Be able to do the thing, but it's hard to see it objectively as an adult who's also supposed to be taking care of yourself all day, every day too, you know?
And therapists aren't necessarily going to know what to say if they're not understanding what dyspraxia is. And a lot of them don't have the training in it. So it's important, even as a therapist, if you're watching this, to think about like, what can I do to help the client organize themselves? Like, let's build a system, right? Like, first, step one, build the system, have them take a picture of it so they can match it, have them put the verbal directions in. But breaking these things down into like minuscule small steps that you would think are like, this is overflow, like too fucking simple. No, like people who have dyspraxia really need it that broken down. Like, you know, I forget to take off my glasses before I go into the shower. It's too late because I just don't put that step in there. Because like
I do that shit all the time.
Sometimes I'm like, I just don't, sometimes I'm wearing them by the time I get to the shower and sometimes I'm not. So it's just hard. So that's where like, you're right. OT can like come in to build those routines and help you build systems so that you can be successful. There are OTs for adults who are like amazing. Like we know Sarah Anderson in Arizona is probably like one of our favorite people to refer to because like, it's amazing that you can send adults there and they can just teach you how to adult and how to function because like we've just suffered with failing so freaking often that we're like, well, fuck, I give up, man. I just suck. But then like when you get in there, you're like, oh, I don't suck that bad. Right.
Well, this is also like so important, I think, for people who function out of a psychiatry lens too, right? If these people are coming to our office and they're saying these things and they're maybe undiagnosed or nobody's recognized these things yet, it's likely that we're going to look at this and go, oh, you sound really depressed because you're so self-deprecating and you say all these mean things about yourself and, you know, all this stuff. And so at that point, it's like you're now getting the incorrect diagnosis, incorrect medication, when something like OT, where you learn how to load a dishwasher, could do so much more for your overall mood than increasing the dose of your SSRI ever will.
So what are things we can ask to assess for this as NPs or as therapists if we're not used to this kind of thing? We can look at like, how are you at copying facial expressions? Like if somebody does something weird with their mouth, can you copy that right away? Or like rolling your R, something like that, right? That's like foreign to you. Are you able to just copy and do? Or do you have a trouble and you have to kind of like sit through it for a couple of minutes and it takes longer to process? If somebody gives you verbal instructions to build furniture, you have verbal instructions in front of you. Do you get it wrong? Do you get it correct? Are you able to do your buttons and dress yourself, or do you have trouble and that takes you longer than other people? What about like handwriting? How does handwriting look? How does like loading the dishwasher look? How does putting things away look? Do you ever forget to brush your teeth? Do you ever forget like the steps to do something very simple that normally you do every day and you're like, man, why did I forget that? I'm so dumb. How's your coordination? Like, do you ride bikes? Do you drive? Like, do you get into accidents a lot, hit a lot of curbs? Do you find yourself having like a lot of bruises and always falling over and knocking things over and you're like, man, I'm the clumsiest person alive? Do you struggle with pouring water into a cup and you always spill it, or you always spill your coffee, or you like misjudge putting your cup in the Keurig and now the coffee went, you know, all over and then it's like dripping everywhere and you're like, man, fucking again?
Or just forget to put the cup there entirely.
That too. And you just press the button and you do it every day, but somehow you still fuck it up, right? All of these like small things are so important when they start adding up and start affecting your self-esteem. So start like assessing small daily things, like even like tying your shoes, things like that. Like, what do you remember about childhood? Do you have a hard time with any of these things? And kind of like trace things back to like, was any of this hard? Did you find gym class stressful because like you couldn't hit the ball or you couldn't always get the soccer ball? Where are you watching when you're like doing things? Are you watching your hands make movements because you don't trust what your body's doing? All of these questions are really great to kind of better understand like what could help this person. So that's what I got for dyspraxia, which I think is pretty interesting. And it sounds like we're both kind of in the trenches here.
What about with medications? Like, is there anything that's helpful or makes any of this worse?
So like when we're looking at ADHD, which can coexist, right? So like, let's talk about some of the most common medications that we use for neurodivergence and ADHD and autism. Guanfacine is probably the most common one. So guanfacine is actually beneficial for the most part for dyspraxia. Guanfacine, I've always told people, slows down your brain just like a couple seconds so you can think about what you're doing before you do it. That can make you less errors. That can make you less like impulsive actions. And it can give you a little bit better control over slowing your brain down to better sequence what you're going to do and think through it and like internally plan before you go ahead and like execute that. So it can also help a little bit with like slowing down the area in the brain that helps with motor planning in general. So the other part of guanfacine is it helps with like some sensory stuff. So like if you're totally overstimulated by like lots of sounds that are happening, you're going to be more likely to be clumsy and have trouble with coordination. Guanfacine can kind of quiet that a little bit, so you're better able to focus, and your brain has less energy going to sensory overwhelm and more energy going to the motor task. And the same thing with like Adderall, right? Like you have a better focus and less inattention, so you're more likely to have like the ability to think forward and less noise in your head and less like sensory overwhelm, so you're able to better like control those movements. Adderall stimulants can like improve some of your reaction time and speed to like planning things and actually like doing it. It can help with like some of the inhibiting some of your like crazy movements. So if you're like, I don't know, my hands are just fucking everywhere and I'm always like breaking shit, like Adderall can kind of slow that down and make it so you're more intentional about what your motor actions are doing, which is cool. And it can also help with like memory, so you're not so like lost and, you know, what did they say, what am I supposed to do, and you're better able to slow down. So that's usually, even like Strattera, same thing, Quellbri, same thing. They just kind of quiet you down and help you focus more so you can make those more intentional movements.
I always kind of describe it as like when people are thinking, oh, that's so back-ass words, that we would give a stimulant to try and slow something down or to be more intentional about something, right? Because everybody's got that stigmatized view of like Adderall, right? And I'm like, yes, it's speeding up your central nervous system, but like to the speed of your thoughts. So it feels like it's slowing down, right? You're just like, oh, okay, I'm sitting in like an empty room now instead of the like 50,000 tabs that are buffering and playing music and chaotically moving around in your brain.
We're talking a little bit before about how like sometimes with all of those thoughts like racing and being so jumbled, it can be hard to have like the planning about what do I say and how does it come out. And sometimes you're talking your story is out of line and out of order, or like what you're saying isn't making sense. But I actually, like when I take my Adderall, I sound like I have a doctorate, but when I don't take my Adderall, I sound like I'm probably like, you know, like I understand why somebody asked me the other day if I should go to medical assisting school when I was talking about something, and she was like, you should be a medical assistant or something. And I was like, oh, maybe that would be cool. But yeah,
It's responsibility.
a lot less responsibility. But yeah, she didn't believe me that I had a doctorate, so I mean that was a thing.
I don't think there's enough medicine on the planet. I'm still always going to say dumb shit and mess it up. So
I feel like you can't take my my ratchet out, so that's fine.
I'm just embracing the fuckery of saying the wrong thing pretty often.
I feel like that's part of the autism too, is like, let's just accept the embarrassment and let's just like take that as a form of like unmasking at this point, and like let's just be weird.
I feel like too, that was the other thing I was going to ask you, is like, is this also integrated with like when somebody has a speech disorder, right? They've got like stuttering or tics or anything like this. Does this also coincide a lot with dyspraxia?
Yes. So that's the other thing too, is even like those repetitive movements that can come, like you see stimming sometimes come very repetitive, or like when they're talking, sometimes like things will come out like 10 times in a row and you'll have like the echolalia. Yeah, it's also very commonly associated with those things too, or tics and like repetition of movements that are involuntary. All of that kind of is in the same brain regions and does coexist often.
Sense.
Right, homies. Thanks for tuning in today for Brain Trash. We hope you learned something new about how to treat your patients or how to treat yourself, and how to be a little bit kinder to yourself if you notice that you are also somebody who has dyspraxia. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment, subscribe, hit like, and we will see you next week.